definitely.
Hi Nina,
Okay. Hi, Gordon.
how are you?
Uh, I'm I'm good, thank you.
Good. Nina's
Um,
a little bit nervous, everybody, aren't you, Nina? Little bit
yeah,
nervous. I
nervously.
wanted to bring you on and talk to you, Nina, because we met. When did we meet? Was it Belmarsh Prison?
It was actually, yeah, it was literally the weekend Julian Assange was put there last April, I think.
Yeah, we met outside, and I did a little interview with you, and we couldn't hear a thing you said because my editing skills were absolutely useless. And we had a little interview. I think a week or two later, we caught up, and we've seen each other a couple of times since, haven't we?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Julian Assange. We'll touch on how we met and what you've done and what you've researched with regards to him. I want to ask you about this coronavirus to begin with, though, because and how it's affected you and how the last couple of months have been for you. Has it been difficult? Have you found any real problems? I've found it a little bit difficult in some ways. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, initially, it was, very anxious time, and it felt like all the fear mongering, and it did feel very scary. So just the experience of going shopping was horrendous, and
Mm,
all the worries. Nobody knew what it was going to actually lead to. So, and I had friends who were scared of losing their job, friends that couldn't had to cancel their wedding. All sorts of people with different issues. I remember some of my elderly neighbours looking terrified, and then sort of making a point of checking with they were okay. But it was, I don't think we can underestimate how frightening the whole thing was a few weeks ago. I mean, it's the worry seems to have kind of worn off now with the easing, and I mean, it's not sort of the fear mongering isn't
yeah.
as bad as it was. But so, I mean, I personally did have anxiety from it, and I know of two people, well, one person, no, two actually, that committed suicide during lockdown,
Oh,
and other cases of people doing, similar, well, cries for help kind of acts, and you wonder if the lockdown has, if that influenced state
of
of mind.
course, yeah. I mean, I remember when, because I suffered from depression in my life, and I know what it's like. And the isolation, it really is a the isolation is something that feeds depression, and it feeds off it, and it's an ever it sort of it feeds depression, and then it feeds off it as well, and it's a depressive. That's why they call it a depression cycle, because you literally get sucked into it like a vortex. And
Yeah,
obviously human contact is something. I mean, I wrote a book ages ago on sort of like how I got myself out of depression, and it's sort of
mm,
like almost like my own memoir.
right,
And um, human contact is massive. It's key. My
yeah,
my feeling was, because I researched the hell out of it. My feeling was we haven't human beings haven't really changed much in the way they live their lives from Stone Age times. Really, if you actually look through all the centuries, the way we lived our lives. It's not until the 70s came and the birth of technology and the birth of I call it the information era, where it's like we can communicate, obviously. So you've got the telephone and first, and then you've got the birth of the internet and social media, and we don't talk to each other like this anymore. I mean, we don't talk to each other face to face anymore like we used to.
yeah,
It's all done digitally. It's all done in 140, 280 characters on Twitter. It's all done by text message as well. I used to hate text messages when they first come out. It was like, if you want something, you want to tell me something, phone me and call me and see how I am.
mm,
And the way we live our lives, because we've sort of had this separation almost, I felt anyway, this separation of human interaction, that was a massive catalyst for why had a massive spike in the rates of depression and suicide in the last 30, 40 years. I honestly do believe that technology is to play for that. And obviously you've got other factors as well, such as diet, and sleep the way you think your cognitive behaviour. But it,
Yeah, and the family unit, as the dynamics of family units have changed as well, haven't they, over the years? People are more, live further apart than their generations. They're split up.
yeah,
They'll tend to go in, well, quite frequently go into homes, or you know, um, they're alone, aren't they? A lot of the time, the governments, didn't they create a minister for loneliness?
yeah, it
I don't know
wasn't
what
that long
happened to
ago,
them.
was it?
No,
Who
obviously
was
didn't
it?
work.
It's probably Preeti Patel or somebody horrible like that. And
Yeah,
then, but yeah, I see what you mean. But oh, that's awful. And
yeah.
I'm assuming that this is something that is going to be underreported as well. Suicides during this period.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose as the months go on, we'll hear more of the results of the isolation. But I mean, it's also things like you said, well, the elderly in particular as well, are much more vulnerable. And if isolation is really bad for things like dementia,
Hmm.
as well as depression.
Yeah.
And the elderly stuck at home, not going out, much more likely to slow down. I know that's happened to a member of my family. We tried to sort of deliver food, phone every day, but she's 80, and the speed that she moves now between now and the lockdown just is very noticeable. She's slowed right down.
No.
Her reactions are slow. She's finding it hard to get out of a chair. And that's really sad to see. And that might have happened anyway, but the effects of the lockdown can't really be underestimated. So,
How do you feel? You're a student. Say you're a student. You watch the media like I do. You
yeah,
watch the propaganda. How do you think that they've sort of? Because obviously, I mean, let's take the BBC. The BBC are meant to their remit are meant to inform, educate, and entertain, aren't they? So inform and education. What do you reckon with regards to their information on this? Because I'm from the Joe Rogan school of thought on this, in that we've had a lot of talk on what the government have done right and when they should have locked down the government, and what the R rate is, and all these, we're going to bring in these things to stop mass gatherings and etc., and we're going to get the police to enforce it. They're saying absolutely nothing or very little in the media and in government, from government voices, on how to actually take care of your own health.
yeah,
And it's amazing. It's like, to fight this thing, we need to be healthy. Surely we should be hammering on how we really need to take care of ourselves. Because I've really been taking this serious over the last couple of months. Have you? With regards to, has it made you think about your health?
yes. I mean, I've been making a point of exercising every day, but
Good
we've
on
got
you.
space. We've got space in one of our rooms, living room. We've got a living room with space, so you can jump about. And we've got space. We've got a little garden as well. So every day exercising, and trying to eat probably as more healthy than actually before,
Yeah.
probably. But I know I watched you. You've taken up running, haven't you?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually did 2 months. 2 months ago, I started on my phone. I've got an app on my phone that sort of said 0 to 10k, and it was one of those, And tomorrow morning
Yeah,
is my 10k run. I'm actually
yeah,
doing it tomorrow. I was only either going to do it this morning or tomorrow morning, and I woke up and I still got some deadness in my legs from the run on Saturday, so I'm going to do it tomorrow. But yeah, like 2 months ago, I couldn't run. I've got, my local park is about just over a kilometre around the
mm,
outside, and I couldn't run. I couldn't run around it, and now I'm running around it 6, 7 times just on training sessions, twice, 3 times a week. It's amazing for anybody out there who hasn't exercised for a long time. And I wasn't in terrible shape, but I was this time last year. I was in terrible shape. Go and look at my videos. You should see You could see by the bags under my eyes and the colour of my skin. But it's amazing how quickly I've gone from really quite unfit to quite fit. It's incredible how quickly it's happened. And to anybody who's thinking about it, I'll just say do it, and push yourself to do it, because the rewards are insane. They really are. You feel cognitively like sharper. You sleep better. That's something that comes naturally from obviously running around and exercising more.
It's
You
very good for anxiety. Very good.
For your mental health, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
You're more confident. And for anybody, I'd just say do it. It's really hard to begin with. I my fiance is really quite fit, and
Mm.
right at the beginning, just before I started the training, she took me on, just an exercise thing, and obviously, me being a man, I tried to impress and did too much, and I couldn't move for like 2 days. I had that delayed onset muscle syndrome that I get, where your muscles feel like they're burning. But
Yeah.
after that, I haven't looked back. I remember she said, she was saying to me, "This won't be forever. It's just the first time. It's just because you've got to get over it." And after that, it's become easier and easier and easier, to the point where I'll be running 6.5 miles tomorrow. 6.5 miles. That's a long way from nothing.
Yeah,
So
it
if
is.
for anybody out there, just please do it, and you will not regret it. You really won't. Especially if you. I've even like I've stopped drinking alcohol as well,
Oh, well,
which
that's
is.
better for me.
It was my birthday last week, and we had a drink on my birthday, but that was it. I haven't touched it for over a month now. I think about a month now. And I was like, right, okay, we're just going to have alcohol just as like special occasions, and then there's the eating side of things as well. And so I haven't just been doing the exercise; it's the eating as well, and really trying to um, eat salad, eat my greens, etc. But also, on the times when I do have a takeaway, I've learned to make them myself. So not only am I not when I'm having a takeaway, for instance tonight, Nina, we're cooking kebabs.
Right.
A proper doner kebab with the
Yeah.
doner meat. We've made it last night. We made it and put it in. It's in the freezer and it's ready to go tonight. So, and like a big block of meat there, will do about 10 kebabs. It cost us about £2.50 to make. And these things are about £4 or £5 each. So and obviously they've put all the preservatives in there and all the salt and all the nastiness as well that goes in it. So yeah, the one thing that's come out of this lockdown for me is taking my health more serious and getting to middle age like I am, and you kind of want to try and live as long as you can when you've got as much to say as I have. Have you like been really looking after your health as well?
So, yeah, I think
Your
so.
food, etc.
Yeah. I've been spending a lot of time looking at the world, what's going on. Like, there's so much going on, isn't there? So, I guess looking after your family, looking after your health, and watching what's going on around the world is about what you can do, really. Sort of
Does
what
it
you,
cause you anxiety looking at the world and how nuts it is?
yeah.
Because I'm honestly scared. I'm honestly,
But
petrified.
you feel so helpless. I mean, um, it's just more and more crazy, isn't it? It's people. It makes you feel. You realise what a bubble the people who are running the show, what a bubble they live in, and how detached they are from everything else. You know, I mean, you've got crazy Mike Pompeo, just literally at war with the world. A sanction on this country, sanction on that country, new sanctions on Syria, new sanctions on Iran. No, despite all of uh, the coronavirus worries, despite all of their own problems that they've got in the US, they're not interested, particularly, it would appear, on sorting those out. They're still more interested in destroying, sabotaging other countries, and you know, disaster abroad, disaster at home, isn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
the latest is they're saying that this was in the New York Times, wasn't it? That Russia were paying people in the Taliban in Afghanistan to kill. They're putting bounties they were giving to the Taliban bounties to kill American and Allied soldiers over in Afghanistan, and it's like, okay, so the New York Times is saying this is a big, and CNN have been talking about it non-stop for the last like 2 days. They've been really hammering hard at this. And then I see an article retweeted from Max Blumenthal this morning, and here's Dan Rather in 1990, whatever it is, glorifying the fact that I think was it Clinton was putting bounties on the heads of was giving the Afghan soldiers bounties. I think it was in the 80s to kill Russian soldiers.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, you're blaming that. You're saying this is terrible. How dare they do that? But you've got a history of doing it yourself, and every single time the hypocrisy is it's astounding. Now I've got a theory in history they've got away with this because they haven't, people haven't had the information to say, hold on a minute. They've took everything at face value before, whereas like the internet has birthed a lot of people who just want the truth, and they're piddling all over Mike Pompeo's message, and the people like that they was it he they remember they went into Iraq to bring democracy to Iraq, wasn't it? We're going to bring the seed of democracy to Iraq, and that's why we're going in there, and we're going to overthrow Saddam to bring the seed of democracy. Well, I mean, they just killed Soleimani, so Iraq said, can you kindly bugger off from our democratically led country? And America went, no, we're going to stop because we're a force for good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder why are they coming out with this now? Why are they making claims now about Russians paying the Taliban? Where's this going to go? So
I think it's desperation, Nina. I just think it's
up.
desperation.
Yeah.
But like you say, where's it going to go? Because whenever they do something, there's always, if they're doing something, if they want to put new sanctions on Venezuela, you've got to ask, is it desperation or are they leading up to something? I spoke to John White recently, and he was saying that Washington's really where the danger in the world is coming from, and Washington's where we really need to keep an eye on, because these people are real. They really don't care about humanity.
No, I mean, you can see now they're so exposed, but it seems to be that it doesn't matter how exposed they are, they're still there, So because I was listening to that video you had with him, and it was really interesting, and he was making some really interesting remarks, and talking about accountability. People aren't they're not held to account, and and that's why so much of this just goes without, no one holds them to account. So
they incentivize things, don't they? It's what was that thing? The 2008 financial crash. They bailed out the banks, obviously, because they bailed out the banks. But the thing is, somebody, I forget who it was now, and they were asking somebody at the very top, well, if it cost you X amount of billions to bail out the banks, why wouldn't you just bail out? And it was because of the obviously subprime mortgages. Why wouldn't you just bail out the people who couldn't pay their mortgages? That would be a hell of a lot less. The banks would get their money, and nothing would crash, and it would cost less. And the guy came back with, the answer he came back was, well, because of moral hazard. Because if you bail out the house owners who can't afford to pay their houses, the ones who took the mortgages out, then you're incentivizing them not paying their mortgage in the future. To which I sit there and go, well, aren't you incentivizing the banks to do the same thing again if you bailed them out and nobody saw any consequences in the past? Isn't that a greater moral hazard? Of which, there's crickets then, because you've brought up a situation, you brought up a question that they have no answer for.
No, and now what would they say? Well, now they've actually incentivized people to take to the streets, haven't they?
Yes.
because especially in America, but they're on the point of mass homelessness with mass evictions. No money. We're talking, they're expecting hunger to be a real problem. People haven't got the income, they don't have the work, and so where's the incentive for them not to run riot? Basically, where's
There
the
is none.
incentive not to protest, not to, um, you
There
know,
is none, and I
mm,
find it interesting that they are they're demonising these for instance, the Black Lives Matter, the protesters, the peaceful protesters. They're demonising them, and almost every instance of police violence I've seen, there's been quite a lot of them over the last month or two in America. Almost every instance has been against peaceful protesters or people in protesters. No violence towards the people who were throwing bricks through windows in the central square and looting all the businesses there. The police seem to be just. I've seen one video of the police actually putting bricks out on the
yeah,
corner pavement.
yeah, I've
You know,
seen some.
they inciting the looters, so then the cameras can point and they can propagandize. The people and saying, "Oh, look at these looters, isn't it bad?" And
But yeah, I
if
agree. I've only seen pretty much peaceful protests. And there was one a few weeks ago. I can't remember where it was, and it was peaceful protesters carrying placards, Black Lives Matter, and they were walking alongside. It was in a southern state. I wish I could remember where it was, but it was a whole bunch of white white people that were anti sort of counter protesters,
mhm.
and they were lined up and they were all armed, they all had guns, and at the very end was a policeman with a gun, and he was effectively standing in line with a bunch of white people holding guns with black protesters, black and white protesters. And you think, just imagine if that was reversed,
I
if
know.
that was a bunch, if the people were holding guns were black.
If the
That's
people holding
amazing.
guns were black, you would see police. You would see gun reform in America immediately if that
It's,
happened.
it's
I
the
imagine.
same within the again, I can't remember off the top of my head where it was, but they've had protesters in courthouses in states
Yeah, that was
armed,
in.
and they've allowed them in.
Yeah, it was the
They've
state
allowed people
capital, and
in.
I remember there's an iconic photo of them screaming in the police faces, and the police are just standing there. And then you've got on the other side of the coin, you've got peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters talking to the police and saying we love you, and they're getting arrested and seven bells kicked out of them. It's I've got a real bugbear with America at the moment. I have, Nina, because I think it's where it's where all the bad things in the world are it's like the epicenter of where all the worst things are coming from, with regards, especially their foreign policy. It's awful, and obviously I've got a bugbear about us following them in. I've got theories as to why that is, and they're all terrible. Um,
But I have this sense, and it's the same here. If that there are people ready to, there are people who are organized, there are people who are good leaders, but they just don't have that platform, or they just don't aren't given a voice, or you're not going to be given a voice. You've got to take it. You've got to take the platform, haven't you? You've got to
yeah, you've just got to.
demand to have your voice heard. No one's going to give that to you. And it's the same here. Or any real opposition is shut down, is slandered or
Yeah,
censored.
you only need to look at the way they've weaponized racism over in America. They weaponized the Me Too movement, so they weaponized sexual assault. They weaponized rape in America. Let's face it, they've gone after Trump, for what he said about grabbing them by the pussy. But then you got Joe Biden, who has literal accusations of rape against him from
Yeah,
staffers, and they were quiet. And it's like, well, you said believe all women. Believe all women apart from those who accuse Joe Biden or accuse that. So that blew that whole movement apart. And I'm hoping the same is going to happen over here with this anti-Semitism row, as they're calling it, with the Labour Party, because I saw an instance this morning. Nina? Have you been following this anti-Semitism row?
Oh yeah, I have, and yeah, Rebecca Long Bailey's being sacked, and yeah, it's hard not to, at least
So she
have that.
retweeted. She tweeted an article from the Independent. You know that massive right wing, that massive racist rag, the Independent. And in an article written by, was it Maxine Peake? Maxine Peake suggests. No, she just suggests this. I don't think she says it outright. It's that the America received training from the IDF, and this is a tactic that they use in Israel. And first of all, that's factual. First of
Yeah,
all, that
you can see plenty of pictures of IDF, IOF with their
I
heat
know. People
on
keep saying it's a
Palestinian necks.
conspiracy theory that Israel do this. Here are the pictures. Look. This
Yeah.
the one picture I tweeted out was taken 2 days after George Floyd's death. It's like 2 days after his death. They're still doing it in Israel to unarmed Palestinians. Anyway, so she tweeted out this article, and they're calling it a conspiracy theory that this is that they're doing this. And then I hear Piers Morgan weighed in this morning, and what he said was this. Have you heard it, Nina? What he said?
I didn't this morning, no.
Piers Morgan said this. I'm going to try and get it word for word. He said that what Rebecca Long Bailey did and what Maxine Peake did is terrible, because what they're saying is let me just get it. Rather than me trying to guess it, let me try and let me share it. Got my Twitter over your face at the moment. They can't see you on the screen. So here it is. He said that the most blatant form of anti-Semitism I can think of. That's what he said. It's the most blatant form of anti-Semitism I can think of, by saying that Jewish people are teaching America how to kneel on the necks. And he specifically said Jewish. He didn't say the IDF. He said Jewish people. So he's conflated the IDF and what the IDF do with the will of all Jews.
Yes.
That's a bit anti-Semitic, isn't it?
Yes.
So even the hero of the coronavirus in the media, Piers Morgan, the second it comes to him delving into this, let's face it, the weaponization of racism in this country, he falls flat on his face and doesn't know what he's doing, or worse, knows exactly what he's doing, and that's what they're telling him to do. In which case, well, what's the truth in this? Does the truth not matter anymore?
Do you think this is all going to sort of come to a head? It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? But what the actual showdown between, which really could have happened under Corbyn, if he'd sort of called them out and defended.
Should have. If he should have come out, he should have come out straight away. And the minute they say it's anti-Semitic, just say, well, actually, no, I'm standing up for Palestinians who are Semites. By the way, Palestinians are Semites. Yeah. If you were to look at literal Semites, most of the Jewish people in Israel hold European passports. So there's a way to argue that against. The argument is, listen, you just look at the treatment that the Likud party and factions within the Israeli government treat Palestinian Semites. That's the very definition of anti-Semitism. I'm standing up for anti-Semitism, standing up against anti-Semitism there. How can I be an anti-Semite?
Yeah.
He could have just said then, this is a trick. This is a way for them to muddy the waters. You remember the Israeli minister who came out and said, this is what we do, it's a trick. And if you want to talk about anti-Semitism, let's talk about the anti-Semitism of Palestinian Arabs. And they would have never, ever, ever asked him that question again. But he didn't.
No one's going to call out Piers Morgan, do you think?
Well, I did. from what
No,
it
I
go,
mean,
for what it matters. I did, and I'm hoping more people do.
yeah.
It's getting to the point where, at the moment, where David Baddiel is retweeting stuff to suggest that Kerry-Ann Mendoza is somehow anti-Semitic and racist and a David Icke supporter or whatever it is. It's getting to the point where facts don't matter anymore.
No, it's we live in a it's you can be as creative as you like. I mean, there's different types of creativity, aren't there? There's the creativity of or the fabricated false narratives that come from, sort of um,
Propagandists.
propaganda, yeah, and right wing Labour, the whole anti-Semitic crisis, for example. We know that if you analyse the figures, that although anti-Semitism does exist, and there's a small pocket of it in the Labour Party,
Yeah.
the actual statistics were not what you would equate to a crisis. So it's all massively, exaggerated. But then you've got the creativity of. I was reading. I was looking at, because of some research I've been doing on Russian oligarchs, and I've been looking at how the extradition courts have treated Russian oligarchs to how they treat Julian Assange. And
Let's get on to that. We've got to
yeah,
talk about this
I
because
was looking
you've really
today.
done some research with regards to the law and the judiciary and everything with regards to this, aren't you? Let's get into it. Do you want to tell
So,
me more?
well, although I'm not a lawyer, but uh, I don't think that is. I think in some ways that matters, in some ways it doesn't. I've met lawyers who have no idea that that they completely buy into the idea that everything that's happened to Julian Assange is proportionate and normal. So in some ways it will be good to have expertise in law. In other ways, actually, I don't think it makes any difference. I know that might sound quite a bad thing to say in some ways, but the law is ours. It's something that belongs to us. We own the
Yeah.
law. It's not owned by lawyers. And the whole thing about experts at the moment is you kind of lose faith with people who maybe start out with good intentions, who are very skilled, very expert in certain subjects, but who become co-opted and start out with they're going to do something noble, and then they end up working for propagandist organizations, for government organizations, and their expertise is wasted on. I'm thinking of, well, for example, yeah, people who do with law, people who work on and study uh, postdoctorate degrees and then go and work in government think tanks.
Is this a systemic problem? Is it, Nina? Do you think? Is it
um,
because of the system? The system beats them down and sort of teaches them to, not to do the right thing or the moral thing to teach
I
them
think
to.
they think they're doing the right thing. I think people. I mean, I really looked into the sanctions, the Magnitsky
Magnitsky.
sanctions that this government are very likely to introduce soon. I think they were going to do put in pass a Magnitsky Act, which was all based on a fake, fabricated story of a, a case of a guy called Magnitsky. Well, I won't
This
go
is
into.
Bill Browder, isn't it?
Yeah, but so but again, it's a story taken by American court, Department of Justice, and used in order to create economic warfare against initially Russia,
It was initially Russia, yeah.
because Magnitsky died in a Russian prison. So the story was designed to well, it was used as a weapon to create sanctions to target individuals. Basically, they were all targeted at Russians. But I mean, the story's been discredited by several good, creditable sources. Um, I think the German paper, Das
Das
Spiegel,
Spiegel, yeah.
they did a good analysis of what happened to Magnitsky, and it looks like Bill Browder, who promoted it and went to the went to America, met with politicians, got it all um, pushed through as an act. So now the government, so the US have this Magnitsky Act, and they hit individuals all around the world now that they don't like, and all they have to do is accuse somebody of something. So it's supposed to be about human rights violations. So we have now the that means that the US and now the UK and a lot of EU countries are doing the same thing. They're using this story being pushed by a billionaire who's got a grudge against Russia, basically,
Yeah.
to create economic warfare that they can target at people and around the world. So that's on top of normal sanctions. So
I remember Garland Nixon I spoke to Garland Nixon about it, and he explained the Magnitsky Act to me, and Bill Browder, his sort of how he was there at the inception and why he would, he would have been in big trouble had it not come in. Yeah, I likened it to sort of like almost like a Patriot Act for sanctions. With the Patriot Act, they can just say, terrorism, and they can then, that's all they're going to do is accuse something of terrorism, and that's what they've got. They accuse somebody of just of laundering drug money or whatever it is with the Magnitsky Act or whatever I've forgotten what it was now. Was it tax or something like that they used it? But they just say, it's for nefarious reasons. This person's or this person's engaging in nefarious activity, therefore we'll sanction them individually. And they've been sanctioning like individual members of the Iranian government just recently, haven't they?
Yeah, I think this was all this I started talking about this because it was about people who use their expertise.
Yeah.
And I think it's so people might start off wanting to do good, but they might get sucked into working for the government, and then they get sucked into helping to construct sanctions policies that will then be targeted at people who, at the whim of
Yeah.
a politician, will then be punished. And the implications of that are that sanctions don't just hurt one individual; they have repercussions. But if you look at the actual wording, you don't actually need any evidence either. They
No.
don't. I really went into the how they decide who's going to be sanctioned.
And this is like their law, isn't it? This is
Oh yeah,
their
and
law.
this is so you might it come out in the House of Commons committee that were looking into the putting together the sanction report. They interviewed various experts, and basically you don't need to have evidence. You can literally Google. So if I was deciding I wanted to sanction somebody, so I didn't like I don't know, some guy in Iran or some guy in Venezuela, and all I've got to do is find an article that will mention them and implicate them, and it could be written by anyone. It could be written by
Joe blogs.
the Daily Mail,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
no evidence at all, no proof, no due process, and then that's enough. That's enough. I can, and then somebody will write that off as sign it, So there's no due process, or very,
Yeah.
very little. The only ability people have is if they then take, government to court for a sanction. So they would say there is due process, but actually,
Well, people
there
keep
is
saying.
really.
I keep hearing people saying to me, Nina, that America's the world's police. We're the world police, and to that I keep saying, no, you're not the world police. You're the global mafia. That's what you are, the global mafia. You find oil under Venezuela, then all of a sudden you want to overthrow the evil the dictatorship of Venezuela. And ever since they found that bloody oil back in, what was it, 2000, and went socialist. It's, you look at what they're doing with Iran, and you look at what they're doing with China as well. China, I know we're going off a bit of tangent here, but I was trying to find out a little bit of information this morning, Nina, because we were talking about America, and we were talking about how they've got a massive homelessness problem over in America, and we were talking actually about homelessness over here because I've noticed that the homeless have started appearing back on the streets again. I
Yeah,
don't know whether you have, and to me, it's like, well, you've proved they don't have to be there. You've proved
yeah,
you have the means and the know-how to take them off the streets, but you're letting them back out now. And there's a whole thing about this Glasgow incident, up in Glasgow. It looks like that this is something to do with, homelessness and maybe asylum seekers maybe being thrown out of the accommodation that they were given. They were thrown in jail almost into these rooms, into these hotels for 23 and a half hours a day, saying you can go out for 30 minutes. And, it looks like this is obviously fed into the mental health problem that we
right.
mentioned earlier with people, and he's gone on a, he's ended up in 3 people or 2 people have ended dead or what it was. The point that what I was trying to find out was China. What's their homelessness problem? So I went to Google, and like, I don't know whether you do this, but I like to ask my phone questions a lot of the time. For hey Google, what's blah 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 blah, and it's just gone off now. Now I've said that, and I asked what was the homelessness
Here's a
figure.
result from the web.
I asked what the homelessness figure was in China, and it said the homelessness figure was 2.4 million in 2011. And
Hmm.
it's like, why is it giving me a figure that's a decade old? China's come a long way in a decade. So you go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia, 2004, 2.4 million figures from 2011. And it's like, well, why are they
Interesting.
using outdated figures? So I started doing, and it's not until you get page 2, page 3 of Google that you start seeing the up-to-date stuff from the BBC, and there was one from the Guardian as well. The one province in China has 80 million people. 80 million. Do you know how many of those, that 80, this is according to the BBC, Nina. You know how many people in that Zhuangzong province, I think it was,
Hmm.
in poverty? 17. 17.
Is this homeless or
In
just
poverty. There were
oh,
no homeless in the entire province. There's no beggars, no
right?
homeless. And I saw one article in the Guardian and it was worded so strange. And I was just looking for this morning. We were having a conversation, I was researching it, and it was so strange because the article in the Guardian was saying something like, it was saying, sorry, my fiance was asleep on the sofa. The phone's gone off and she just fell off the sofa
Oh no.
because her phone went off. I'm sorry. I can hear her laughing now in the bedroom. I'm sorry, that's so funny. Yeah, so we should have caught that. It was just out of shot. Anyway, so yeah, 17. That's it. 17 people. That's in poverty. There was one article in the Guardian that I saw, and they phrased it so well. They said 2.4 million Chinese, 2.4 million Chinese in poverty being forcibly removed from their homes. That's basically what the title said. And she's like, that's awful. 2.4 million people already being poverty. And then you read the article and you find in the second half of the article, what they're actually doing then is they're relocating 2.4 million people from shacks in rice fields into
Yeah.
brand new apartments with heating and lighting and
Oh,
electric and
really?
running water. And
Yeah.
this is the way they've done it. And it's absolutely amazing, to the point where we were honestly having a conversation and trying to understand whether you know how we say that China's got the censored internet. We were actually having a conversation going, well, could it? But you know how they project, and this is projection. They project onto the other side what they're doing. Maybe we're the ones who have got the censored internet, and China are the ones who haven't. How the bloody hell would we know if they're giving us facts from 10 years ago on Wikipedia about China's homelessness problem? 17 people in poverty. Now, the BBC in this article did say that... You want to lie down? You had enough? You want to lie down? Sorry. The BBC did. Ellie, go and lie down now. So the BBC did say in this. Sorry about that. My dog
All
barking.
right.
The BBC did say in this article that how China what the standard of poverty for China is maybe a little bit higher than lower rather than they're saying it should be or would be in any other country, but still no beggars, no homeless in one
Yeah,
province of 80 million people, and I'm assuming that we're going to see the same all throughout China, especially if they're, as I found out not long ago, they're building 6,000 miles of motorway a year. You know that?
that's incredible, isn't it?
6,000. I, d-
Yeah.
I live pretty close to the M6 to Spaghetti Junction. They've been resurfacing that part of the motorway since 1944. Since before it was
Yeah,
even bloody built, I think. It's constantly coned off, resurfacing. They build 6,000 miles of motorway a year in China. And these, if you look at it, it's not roads on the floor, motorway on the ground. It's
yeah.
motorway hundreds of feet up in the mountains on stilts.
They don't mess around, do they? They just get on
We're
and do what
doomed.
they need to do.
We're doomed. If we keep
Yeah.
doing America's bidding, we're doomed. We're done for. Because they're going to bring us down with them if we carry on, aren't they? Sorry, I know.
It's no, it's a big worry. Everyone's afraid. Everyone is worried about that. About what's we don't want to be Trump's bitch
No, we don't.
any
You were
longer.
saying about the judiciary though, and saying how.
Oh, so yeah, I've been looking into um, just although I'm not a lawyer, it does interest me that the idea um, that the UK courts have just turned a blind eye to the law. I just know other way of actually saying it. It's so if you're in any doubt of how unfair the courts are treating, well, the British authorities treat Julian Assange, just look at the way they've treated oligarchs fleeing from Russia. Persecution.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me the other day. I haven't heard it. Explain to me how they've treated these Russian oligarchs compared to Assange.
So around 2003, between 2003 2005, there was a massive trial in Russia, and it was sort of the 90s was a big decade of oligarchs making huge amounts of money
Yeah,
from Russian assets, from the state assets.
yeah, from selling
Um,
off the Russian assets to the Americans, strangely enough, wasn't it,
yes,
and making all their money with America and the
and
UK as well.
a lot of money came over into the UK, huge amounts of money into the Isle of Man, offshore accounts, shell
Of
accounts.
course.
And uh, the big company, one of the major companies was Yukos Oil, and so you had these major shareholders that were arrested for tax evasion,
Hmm.
and there were a number of reasons behind it. They'd rigged auctions. So the state held auctions. They'd rigged the auctions. They were the only people that had bidders at the auction, and they bought up huge amounts of the assets. And they would then, I don't know, they routed oil in areas that weren't supposed to have oil or that they didn't have permits for,
Yeah.
and ended up with huge amounts of um, tax bills
Hmm.
from the Russian authorities.
Yeah.
Um, so there was one guy called Khodorkovsky, and his partner Lebedev, and there were a whole number of other people that fled. So those two were arrested in Russia on
Hmm.
tax evasion charges and a number of other charges as well. There were actually two trials. There was
I
so
think,
many
was this
charges
before Putin came into power or just after?
just after.
Right, okay. Because he really did. He sort of ran on cleaning up the corruption and
Yeah,
actually, if you look at what he's done in that time since, it's quite amazing
yeah.
how the country turned around. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so but there were a number of people attached, other shareholders, other associates of Khodorkovsky, Lebedev, who fled Russia. Some of them went to Israel, some of them came over to the UK. The ones that came over to the UK, the Russian Federation wanted to extradite them, to attend, to go to court because they were being charged with financial crimes, with tax evasion, with
Yeah.
whatever, conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit other things. So their extradition cases were refused, and the judge said that there was a guy called Workman, Judge Workman, and he said that the motivation, that the charges were politically motivated against the associates. There's one guy in particular called Alexander Timerko. He's a very, very big donor for the Tory party.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Khodorkovsky's case became known as politically motivated. That's how it was sold over in the West, and he
Yeah.
was made out to be some kind of capitalist martyr. And actually, if you look at the amounts of money that this involved, the court case involved, it was huge, huge amounts of money.
Hmm.
But the courts were very concerned about their human rights. They didn't want them to be extradited, Timerko and the others to be extradited, because they wouldn't get a fair trial, and all of this. So they could stay in the UK. So but if you look at the comparison of the crimes, so which one would you say is politically motivated crime? One is massive financial crimes, including defrauding the state. And the other one is espionage for publishing war crimes. Now, which one of those would you say is politically motivated, more likely?
I would say definitely the war crimes thing would be the politically motivated one, wouldn't you,
So
Dina?
you'd think so, wouldn't you? So how is it that an extradition court will very early on decide that defrauding the state and financial crimes are politically motivated, but they seem to be the same extradition court, different judges, same,
Hmm.
but British courts have no intention of recognising political motivation behind charges of espionage. So my question is, how is that? How can an extradition court decide, well, this is politically motivated? So it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it.
I if you look at, so this is why I've always said that this is why they've muddied the waters so much in the Assange case. Once I realised exactly what the issue was with Julian Assange, because if you're not paying 100%, if you're not paying attention to this case, and if you haven't, you don't know what the bloody hell's going on. The average person on the street doesn't know what's going on. The media are so adept at confusing matters and writing headlines that just make no sense whatsoever, and muddying the waters, and leaving massive amounts of huge information out of their reporting to paint a narrative. And obviously they've been trying to paint a narrative that Julian Assange is a bad egg for basically a decade, and trying to smear him and slander him, to the point where then I think the British public will, hopefully they'll go, oh well, good riddance to him, he's cost us millions in police hours, who is this hacker anyway? But send him off to America, and there you go, he's a hacker. And nobody then will care about him, and obviously he will end up then going to this court in Virginia, which is where Langley is, CIA headquarters. So everybody over there is either spook, or a spook's wife or husband, or a family member of a spook, or
Yeah.
he owns the corner shop that sells to the CIA spooks. So you know what I mean? It's like their own bloody base, if you like. So there's no way that he's going to get a fair trial in that court, which is manned by everybody. Even the jury are going to be plucked from that area, from the area with the CIA, and he has no defence against it whatsoever. They can produce fabricated evidence, and he can't even say yes, I did it, and here's why. He can't even explain why he did it if he did it, which he didn't. So they're hoping that this is just going to go away because. Because he can publish secrets, and they don't want their secrets to come out the way he has done in the past. And obviously, the ones he published in 2016 were the real catalyst for this. Let's face it.
But the real sort of fundamentally, it's the impunity. That's how can anyone, if anyone, like you say, it's very, very complicated, and it's very easy to not look at what's happened to Julian Assange because it's so complicated that people don't know where to start. Maybe that's why then the campaign to support him is so important, because they're the only ones really doing that. But it's the impunity of the British authorities. It's the impunity of the courts, that they can be concerned about the human rights of these very rich people who get their money from very dubious sources, and we've got to make sure they're sacrosanct. We've got to make sure their human rights are protected. And we've got a guy on the other side who has been deprived of everything, his family, everything, because he dared to publish, to expose.
He did the job of a journalist. He did the job of an editor of a news organisation, and he's done the job of the journalist from what I can tell. See, the reason I got so involved in the Julian Assange thing, and I really did get active in it, and hopefully I did some work that maybe might mean something, or hopefully if I could have just changed the mind of one person, then I've done the job. It's just. But the reason why I got so upset and angry about it was because I honestly believe, Nina, that if any Englishman, or the 99% of Englishmen, of British men, of Brits, men and women, if they were to have 10 minutes with me to sit down and tell them the facts without the case. Remember, I've never been a Julian Assange fanboy. I don't know the guy. I've never met him. In my experience, highly intelligent people are absolute dicks. That's just my experience. The reason I stood up so much for him, because I believe any Englishman, if they knew the facts, would go down there and have chained themselves to that Ecuadorian embassy and say, over my dead body, are you going to give him to the Americans? And that's essentially what I decided to do, because they're trying to criminalise the fourth estate here. And the fourth estate, that's they got the first three, you got the noblemen, the clergy, and the whatnot, and then you got the fourth estate, and holding them all to account, and that's what our media is meant to do. And the fourth estate is there to do the four things that I've outlined in the past. Your job as a journalist is to either gather information, like you do as a journalist, or to be a point of information that point where people can partake information and give you information. Whistleblowers can give you information, etc. Then your second job is to verify it's true. Your third job is then to publish it on a platform if it's in the public interest. And your fourth job is to protect the source at all costs if you got it from a source, because obviously they could be in peril for sharing that information with you. That job in the analog age was a difficult job to do. In the digital age, what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have done is create a platform that does that job perfectly. Better than anybody else in history. And if you actually look at what they've published, and the scoops that they've had, and the governments that they've brought to their knees, the entire nations, and they've released secrets on every country in the world almost, not just, people just say, oh, why don't they release stuff about Russia? Really, go to WikiLeaks and type in Russia, go to WikiLeaks,
Yeah,
type in Israel.
absolutely.
They've released information on it. They did one on the UK not long ago about a guy who went to them and just said, I just walked onto a nuclear submarine without showing any information at all,
Mm.
and here's how I did it.
Yeah.
It's if
But
anybody
I've
knew just how
seen,
important he was, they would fight tooth and nail. Because if we let him go, honestly, I believe we are just buckling under to fascism. Because that's what it is. It's
well,
fascism what
this
they're doing.
this is the whole, the bigger picture, isn't it? It's the American global jurisdiction, and it's the UK authorities, the UK courts buckling under pressure, no independence. So I mean, this is the point that I'm getting at, that the courts are losing their legitimacy as courts. You know,
Do you
they're
think it's
not
been
able.
designed that way? Because I watched an interview with I've forgotten what her name is now. It might have been Lady Arbuthnot. Who is the head judge in the UK? The head judge, is it Lady Arbuthnot, or is
No,
she
I
just the
know.
head of the chief
It,
magistrate?
oh, I can't.
Anyway, it was an
I
interview.
know
You
who
might
you. I
you might remember it was an interview on the BBC last year, and she
Lady
was
Hale.
retiring. Sorry.
Lady Hale. Is it
Lady
Lady
Hale,
Hale?
you know what I'm talking about, and she was
Yeah.
saying that the problem that the courts have got at the moment, they've got a massive problem in that they are witnessing the decay of society, and the majority of cases that they are brought before the courts are not a criminal case. There are either a mental health case or they're a social issue. That's what they're dealing with the majority of the time. And do you? Here's the thing. We've been thinking about this. We've been talking about it, and I actually think that there's a way that we can all help change this, and there's a way forward because, like you said earlier, they're our laws. So why don't our courts, much the same as our police force, by the way, have civilian oversight rather than you know? Like in the police force, for instance, they have internal affairs, and there's always accusations that cops look after cops, and see a lot of that in America. Not so much over here, but I'm sure it happens. I know, my fiance used to go out with a cop, and she's told stories of how he'd come home and his stuff has been nicked out of his locker. Yeah, the police locker been
Yeah.
nicked. The police stealing from the police. She's told stories of how she's gone out with him on a night out with him and his colleagues, and she's gone into the toilet and his female colleagues, police officers, are snorting coke in the club, and then the
Yeah.
next day they're arresting people for a 10 bag of weed.
Mm.
The So it does happen in this country, and I think it's a moral hazard again, isn't it? If police officers can get away with this behaviour once or twice, they can do it with impunity then, and it becomes second nature to them, and then you've got a systemic problem. Well, with civilian oversight, surely that's going to be you could look at it like jury service in a way. And especially looking at the future, we're going to have a massive problem with jobs in this country by the look of it. Surely we can say, well, here's a I don't know 16-week period. You've got your call up for the next 5 years. You've got to do 3 months on, and you're going to look at cases of police brutality, or you're going to look at cases of
Yeah.
the courts, etc. And
Yeah.
you're really going to educate not just the public then on what the police have to go through on a daily basis, because let's face it, it's a fucking hard job, and I wouldn't want to do it. But you're also going to maybe any bad police, you're going to weed them out of the system straight away, because they're going to be like, well, if there's oversight from civilians, I can't get away with my crap anymore. I've got to go back to being a punk again, or whatever, you see my point.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a better way forward doing that than just, I mean, leaving it the way it is or expecting them to reform themselves. It's just
No.
not going to happen, is it?
I mean, I agree. Well, I've thought of that myself, actually, with things like public inquiries. Should be people led, should be led by a community of people. Maybe they decide which lawyers they want, which judge they might want, but they decide, and they do the groundwork and they do the decision making. I mean, it just seems crazy that it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We know that you can have judges in to carry out public inquiries. It does never lead to satisfaction anyway. No. All reports get hidden, they get sat on, or they get lost. We've seen that, haven't we, with some of Theresa May's reports.
Yeah,
she sat on. But it's just that something has to give. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. I mean, the courts. It's the courts, it's the prison system as well. I mean, the whole what's happened to Julian Assange has exposed every area, really, where it's corrupt, where it's weak, where it's compromised. I mean, the fact that he was in the health ward for several months.
Yeah.
That just wasn't an issue for Belmarsh Prison. That's the actual care and health of all prisoners is a collaborative. It's national. It's the NHS England. It's a number of various different organisations that together are responsible for the health of every individual prisoner. It's not just Belmarsh Prison, so they're all to be held account. So why are they not all? It shows state-sponsored. Everyone's either too scared or too compromised. But how can you go into a Category A prison and you've done nothing? You've not committed a crime, and you're not wanted for any violent crime, and you could stay in that Category A prison indefinitely. How can that be unacceptable? And then for several months of that, you go into one room and you're not allowed to see anybody else. And the person who's done that to you doesn't have to be accountable. It doesn't have to say even why.
Not only that, but if you imagine, like, Julian, he's been in arbitrary detention for 7 years. Those are the words of the United Nations, not me. Been in arbitrary detention for 7 years. He was dragged out in what John White calls an act of fascism from his detention after, the IMF promised to give Ecuador a load of loans and injection, of which then months later the people rose up and said we're not going to accept this, and they had to back down, and they even changed the capital of their country at one stage because they were chasing after the horrific guy who took over. So they dragged him out in an act of an act of fascism, and then he's been thrown into Belmarsh. He hasn't, in his letter to me, I remember him saying that he's got 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day exercise. He's got just 20 minutes a day to try and get a phone call. He has to wait in line for other people. He's got no access, or he had no access to a library or anything like that. He could only get one book from at a time. He had no access to internet, and no access to his lawyers, access to his defence of any kind. No. And on the other side, you've got the most powerful country in the world. A nuclear-armed juggernaut of a superpower with lawyers up the wazoo, a decade for them to prepare. How is that fair? How is it fair that they get a decade to prepare? Remember, they sealed this indictment back in, was it 2010? So they knew they were after him with this indictment, and it was Barack Obama who went after him with this indictment, that they finally got him using the Espionage Act, a 1917 law from America that was used to imprison conscientious objectors, if I remember right. They've had all of that 10 years, millions and millions of dollars of attorneys and lawyers going after him, trying to say, we'll paint him as he's been painted in that time and smeared and slandered in the media as a rapist. A rapist. The worst kind of slander. I spoke to a lady who was the Lisa Longstaff. I'm not sure whether you're aware of her. She's the spokeswoman for Women Against
yes.
Rape.
Yeah,
And I saw a couple of Free the Truth events last year, and I remember speaking to her, and she said in her speech that, whilst our country has been pursuing this case of non-rape for a decade, so it's something that she says is an insult to real victims of rape. It's no diminishing what those women's accusations at all, but this is not. And while they've been going after him for a decade on this ridiculous charge of rape and smearing him as a rapist when there's no evidence to actually back that up whatsoever, other than a broken condom with no DNA whatsoever on. It's strange.
yeah.
But meanwhile, real rapists in this country, they're not pursuing. They're letting those go. And she just listed off a list of people who like horrific rapists, that they didn't pursue in this country because of lack of evidence or whatever. Meanwhile, they're pursuing Julian Assange like this. It's absolutely disgusting, and it makes me honestly ashamed to be British that our law system, the Magna Carta comes from our goddamn country. We are basically the basis for all law in the West, and we're treating a journalist like this for what? What crime did he do? Oh yeah, he published the truth that proved lying war criminals were all lying war criminals.
Yeah, and I mean, what's disgusting as well is our MPs, the politicians, they've all lined up to just, well, they're all, who's recognised, who's actually,
Chris Williamson.
and
Look what happened
just
to him.
a handful, and the rest are quite happy to play along with this weaponising of sexual violence. Even the ones that, the feminists and the Labour Party, the ones that are quite happy to go along with weaponising sexual violence, which is what they have done by promoting, the whole.
You're right. It's the weaponisation of rape.
Yeah.
It's the weaponisation of rape, and it's the weaponisation of sexual assault.
I mean, if I was if I wanted justice for women, I would be saying, listen, I want clarity from the CPS. I want clarity from the Swedish prosecutors. What were they doing for 6 years?
Yeah.
Why wasn't Marianne Nye? What were they doing? Why was there a delay?
And then there's Keir Starmer's involvement in all this as well. He was the head of the CPS at the time, wasn't he, Keir Starmer? And he was the one who signed the. He delayed it, didn't he? He delayed something very early on that kept the case going. I can't quite remember. Do you remember what that was, Nia?
What, Starmer?
Keir Starmer, yeah. He was the head of the CPS at the time, and he delayed something with the case that basically delayed first of all, it delayed the people who were making the accusations. It delayed any chance of them getting, what they wanted, and also it made sure that Julian Assange was kept, here in sort of isolation. And
I think there were other. I know some of the emails that.
When the emails saying "Don't you back out now" or "Don't you get cold feet now," that sort of thing to the Swedish prosecutors. It's Nils Meltzer calls it the collective persecution, the collective ganging up by 4 states against a journalist. That's exactly what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So where is this? Where is the demand by, the liberal establishment, by the feminists, to analyse? To look at the behaviour of the CPS, to hold CPS to account if they stopped if there was an investigation, why would your prosecuting services prevent it? Why would they stall it? So if you're going to claim that you want, you want the truth for women who, or anyone who's accused, makes allegations, you would expect a thorough, aggressive, professional prosecuting service, wouldn't you? To be held accountable.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want years of mysterious silence,
No, you
would you?
wouldn't.
With these strange kind of irregularities. It's.
You know what it makes me think? You know what it makes me ask? It makes me ask this, Nina. It makes me think. Why is it? What has the United States got on us? What power do they wield over us if we are willing to basically throw the rule of law out of the window to hand a journalist over to them? A journalist who's never committed a crime in this country. Not,
It's amazing.
the crime of jumping bail. Well, he wasn't jumping bail. He was escaping. He was escaping his extradition to the United States, which is exactly what would have happened had he not sought asylum. And we know that because the signed extradition, which he said was there, which.
The amount of resources, state resources, that have gone into this are absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It makes you wonder, what have they got on us? Why are we jumping through hoops for America? Why? It wasn't. I'm 46. I've just been turned 46, Nina. I remember growing up, the IRA and the Troubles, and I remember it was quite well known that the funding for the IRA and the other side of the IRA was from America. And I know that we begged America to stop the flow of money into the IRA, and they fucking refused for decades. So I'm wondering, this special relationship, which, by the way, I watch a lot of media in the United States. I watch a lot of it, and it's only in the UK that we call it a special relationship. They never refer to it as a special relationship over in America with the United Kingdom. They just don't. It's only one side that calls it a special relationship. It just makes me wonder, what have they got on us? What is it that they've got on us that makes us throw the rule of law out the window? That literally just makes us, we might as well be tearing the Magna Carta up. So what have they got on us?
What sort of state secrets?
What is it? Well, Epstein. That's what I go to straight away. Really, Epstein. He had a lot of UK MPs in his little black book, didn't he? He had 14 ways of contacting Peter Mandelson, and Tony Blair was in his little black book. And this wasn't a little black book of, like a diary like you and I would have with Nina and her number. No. This is powerful people all around the world that he had. So why has he got, and obviously we know all about Prince Andrew and the royal family, etc. What have the Americans got on us? And if he was a honey trap, what is this? Why? This is what it makes me think. It makes me think that we're in the clutches of a so-called ally that's somehow blackmailing us to do their bidding.
Yeah.
And that's what it makes me think. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. And this is why I'm so goddamn sure that America are not going to get their hands on him. Because if they do, they'll kill him.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, one of the things that I find really grates me is whenever there's a terrible incident, or there's a mass killing, or there's somebody who's being watched or on a list by the intelligence services in the UK, but they don't have enough money to follow them. They don't have money to watch what they're doing, or to whatever.
Millions to guard Assange.
But I mean, this is what really is so screwed up, that they, and the press for 3 years took photos of 50 policemen standing around the Ecuadorian embassy. How many policemen? And they didn't bother to point out that.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Ellie, go and
No
lie
worries.
down, please. Go and lie down. Thank you. Somebody just knocked at my door. Lie down, please. I'm very sorry, Nina. Carry on.
Yeah, so all of those years, this money that was public money that was squandered, and who was it? Boris Johnson was the Lord Mayor of London then, wasn't
Yeah.
he? So he would have been quite happy to spend that money
Yeah, it's
on
millions
a
just
bounty,
on the
on a US
policing.
bounty. And it's just so obscene. So all of that money, and then after, obviously, the police were then removed because it was too conspicuous then for public consumption to see all this money being thrown at trying to capture one person, charged with no crime, and just the huge amounts of money that now, when we have really crazy, violent people that are very dangerous, we don't have the funds
I
to
know.
stop them.
He's in prison with terrorists. He's in that prison with terrorists. I mean, literally, the guy who killed the guy who tried to decapitate Lee Rigby in the middle of the high street. He's in that prison with him. He's literally surrounded by terrorists. A journalist of a publication that's never ever gotten anything wrong.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
You think about all that they've dropped.
Cannot be charged with, accused of fake news.
No.
Propaganda. It's all dead straight.
No. We are living in an age right now where everybody is accused of fake news. Everybody is accused. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, BBC, Channel 4, me, you, 21st Century Wired, bloody Joanne. Everybody's accused of fake news. Nobody accuses WikiLeaks of fake news. Nobody at all. They've never, because they've dropped over 1 million documents a year on average for the 15 years. That's 15 million documents or whatever it is, on pretty much every country in the world. Not a single one has been said is fake. None. That's incredible, isn't it? That's what we need as a media to fight the fake news, correct?
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Rapist. He must be a rapist. This is why they call him that. This is why they smear him and slander him, and this is why they resort, obviously, to these smear and slander tactics, because they can't argue with him on the issues. They can't smear him on the issues, because if people hear the issues and hear what he stands for, then people will go, oh, I support that guy then. So they have to.
But it shows you the power of truth, doesn't it, as well? That they are absolutely terrified of someone who will not be bought, who's not for sale. So if you have conviction, if you are prepared to find the truth and expose the truth, and you're not going to be bought, you're a real threat, and they will do whatever to silence you.
Well, I mean, you only need to look at where Julian Assange is to see that that's the case. And have you been keeping up on the events with regards to Duma? That the Syria bombing in 2017 and the OPCW leaks since then. Yes,
I haven't read sort of anything recently, but I know what you mean. So.
It's the whistleblowers coming out. There's 4 whistleblowers now that have come out. 4 whistleblowers that have come out from the OPCW. The OPCW, for those who are listening who don't know, that's the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. This is an organisation that the United Nations use as the authority on what is a chemical weapons attack or not. And in April of 2017, you may remember, according to the media, Assad gassed his own people just at the point where he was going to win the war against the, quote, moderate rebels. And when I say, quote, moderate rebels, what I mean is al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. the people that we're supporting
Yeah.
against Assad. They don't tell you that part, do they? They don't tell you that al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda in Syria.
No.
They don't tell
They're
you
human
that
rights
actually we're
activists that we
supporting the
support.
terrorists here.
Yeah.
So he apparently he's on the verge of winning the war against them and ousting these moderate rebels #terrorists from Duma. At which point he decides to drop two canisters of chlorine on their heads. Now, to people like me, it made no sense, because why would you gas people just at the point where you're on the war, which is the one thing that's going to bring the wrath of powers much bigger than you, because that's their red line in the sand. And it's exactly what happened. We went and bombed them along with America and France just afterwards. People they were questioning though why we would bomb them in the way that we did, because if you remember, we bombed targets and nobody was killed. We were told the Americans gave Russia a heads up beforehand what was happening. Things like one of the buildings that I know that they said was that they leveled, which they said was a chemical weapons factory, ended up being a factory that produced a sort of a vaccination for snake venom. This is the sort of thing that they
Yeah.
bombed. And then obviously we've got sanctions on Syria and the ongoing war ever since. I mean, we had it for 5 years anyway. And this is a regime change war by proxies in Syria. Go and look up Operation Timber Sycamore. The United States have been trying to do it. They jumped on the back of the Arab Spring back in 2012. This is how they've done it. But again, the question, the white helmets were found to have filmed this incident of these children suffering from what they said was chemical weapons, chlorine, and yeah, it was a chemical weapons attack. But it turns out that if you actually scratch under the surface, obviously we found out through the reporting of Robert Fisk, actually these kids weren't suffering from chlorine exposure. It was hypoxia. There was shelling in the area, dust. They were in tunnels, dust came up and they couldn't breathe. So the whole thing was a total fabrication. The only people that actually would benefit from a chemical weapons attack in that area at that time were the, quote, moderate rebels, i.e. the terrorists that we're supporting, al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda. So why would Assad do it, and why did the media go along with it? And then we find out that it was about 6 months ago, James Le Mesurier, the guy who founded the White Helmets, fell out of a building in Turkey, fell out of a window. It's all very cloak and dagger spy stuff, isn't it? And we don't necessarily. Are we ever going to find out the truth with regards to this, you think? And if we find out the truth, what version of the truth is it?
I don't know. I mean, it is being people are daring to speak up, aren't they? The whistleblowers, but it's only thanks to people who are really sort of brave enough to put themselves in danger of hearing what the truth is.
These 4 whistleblowers from the OPCW, they're basically there's evidence there. They've seen emails of them questioning why are you doing it this way? Why aren't you following protocol? All up to the point where now they're basically saying that this is the conclusions that were the OPCW came to with regards to Duma, which are totally opposite to what I've just said. The conclusions, they were forced They were forced to come to those conclusions by America and the powers, and massive political force was put upon them. And anybody who was actually on the fact-finding mission on the ground weren't actually in the final report. It was all done by people in Turkey, I believe, not people who've been on the ground. The chief engineer, Henderson, who was the first whistleblower to come out, he was the chief engineer, the chief guy, and he did a report saying these cylinders can using physics, there's no way that they could fall through this building in the way that they did and gently land on a bed. And that's their chief engineer saying that. And then you've got obviously all the evidence with regards to the people who did die, during that Dimmack account, the deceased, there's a lot of evidence to say, well, hold on, I mean, these looked like they were gassed by chlorine, but they were showing no signs of running away. There was a 100% mortality rate, which is never the case with chlorine. It's usually about 5%. It
Yeah.
looks very much like these people were gassed somewhere else and actually shipped into that area. And that to me screams the white helmets, which we fund to
Yeah.
millions of pounds, have the white helmets looks like that they have filmed and done a false flag here, which has led to us bombing a democratically elected country, which is by very definition the supreme war crime. And
Yeah. It is a
again,
filthy
why
campaign
have we
against
done
it.
it? Why are
Yeah.
we doing this? We're doing this for the Americans because a week before Trump said he wanted to pull out of Syria, if you remember. That's when this all happened. And then all of a sudden, oh, there's a chemical weapons attack and it's not going to happen anymore. More troops are going there and we're sanctioning them and bombing them.
And now they've just written a new bunch of sanctions, haven't they? The Caesar Act, which to me looks like it's similar along the lines of the Magnitsky Act. It's taking a story, a narrative from a particular group of people that have a big invested interest, and using it to construct economic warfare. So very similar to the Magnitsky Act. So they can. I think it's in Syria. They did it a few days ago.
Yeah,
Last week, the
it's,
Caesar Act sanctions.
you're right in saying that they're constructing it, and they construct it the same way as they, for instance, with Syria, they construct the press constructed the narrative with Syria by propping up this organisation as the organisation who was absolutely they were the gospel on what was happening in Syria with regards to chemical weapons and how many people were killed or injured by chemical weapons, etc. in Syria, and that's this organisation called the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. This is a geezer in Coventry. He's
Yeah.
25 miles away. He
Receiving
was
money from the government,
yeah,
presumably.
£98,000
NGO.
in equipment he got in a grant from the government after fleeing Syria because he was facing a fourth jail term for
Yeah.
fraud. Now, this is somebody who's obviously got a vested interest against Assad in Syria, isn't it? He was going to be imprisoned. So it's hardly an objective, unbiased source that they're using. And by calling it the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, don't you think that that's, the Trade Descriptions Act would have a field day with it, for Christ's
Yeah.
sake? You're making out that it's some gigantic Syrian charity. It's a geezer in Coventry.
Yeah.
And they're doing it the same way with this, the Caesar Act, did you say?
So I think I was reading. There's a few articles on it. So it was a few days ago or last week. So another one of Mike Pompeo's big achievements. So I think it was like along the lines of Magnitsky Act. So it's based on a narrative of human rights abuses,
Right.
and I think it was based on some due to a lobby, a anti-Syria government,
Right.
pro-Western, pro-NATO, or Gulf states lobby that were trying to get US to impose sanctions on the Syrian government for over a period of time, based on accusations they made about deaths in prison. But I
Right.
think, again, like we talked about Max Blumenthal earlier, I think he's done an expose of this, and he's just published an article showing that the whole it was kind of a project, if you like, funded by groups that fund Al-Qaeda,
Right.
with a vested interest in overthrowing the Syrian government. They pushed this project through to on the back of stories of abuse. I think they had some photographs of dead bodies,
Right.
and they were using them, but they weren't. There was no evidence where these pictures actually came
Yeah.
from. I don't think they were really kind of examined forensically.
It's good
So
way to get
it's
people
again,
to
like we were
think a
saying,
certain way, though, isn't it?
you can say anything is a piece of evidence, and as long as it's attached to the right cause,
Yeah.
the US government will enshrine it in a legislation and create targets, create economic, targets to punish whoever it wants.
Of course.
So,
They,
so this is on the back of everything. Now the Syrians are having to deal with this new set of sanctions that are really going to hit the country and hit the population. So the US doesn't give up. It's just not giving up, is it? It's
no, it's not, and it's not giving up. And I like it. The end of Terminator 2, when the T-1000 gets Arnie presses the button, says "Hasta la vista, baby," and the bullet explodes in the T-1000, and he falls into that vat of molten sort of metal, and you can see him go, and he's all the faces of all the people, or all the nastiness that he's done comes to the fore. I think that's like 2020. And we're seeing all the evil faces of the American empire and what it's done around the world. And it's certainly coming to the fore, and it's almost like it's a dying empire. It's dying, and you're seeing the last throes and the last nonsense. I mean, the nonsense that I hear coming out of Trump's mouth. I don't talk about him very often, but the nonsense I hear coming out of Trump's mouth is just it's. Have you seen that comedian? Is it Sarah Cooper who does the lip syncing of him in those little Twitter videos?
It's really good.
When he's talking about
Genius.
if the light on it, and he said, and if this disinfectant, you can the disinfectant kills it in a second. So maybe we can put some disinfectant on the inside, and for that you will need medical doctors. Medical doctors. It's how can this man be the most powerful man in the world? It's like last days of Caligula. A horse is going to be senator next, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's a scary time,
crazy,
Nina.
isn't it?
It's a scary time.
But it's really you're right. I mean, we can visibly, it's visibly decaying, isn't it? The US visibly
Visibly, yeah.
apart.
Yeah, I've got friends over there, and I'm hoping that there's going to be big change at the end of it, because I mean, it was 2008 I went over there, and that's when I found out just how bad the healthcare problem was over in America, and the fact that they had to pay for healthcare, etc. And then it's not until that was 12 years ago. I mean, we've had the housing crash and all the people thrown out, and obviously all the nonsense for the last 12 years since then. And like you say, it's decaying. I mean, have you seen the pictures of LA with the tent cities?
I saw a documentary about Seattle the other day, because that's where they had the autonomous zone.
The Chaz.
But the terrible homelessness there. I mean, just dreadful homelessness.
Sorry, you carry on.
No, I mean, it's so, the last 20 years of neoliberal, this is what the big story is for me with and it is for many people with the pandemic, is the neoliberalism. Yeah. It's really exposed how depraved
we could
it is.
So easily have prepared for this, couldn't we? It would have cost about, £1 million, £2 million quid. We could have really, but instead of actually preparing for it and safeguarding the nation like they're remitted to do, instead they've tried to sell off everything and make the NHS so inefficient that it gets privatised and sold off to the Americans. And I think the jig is up now, Nina, don't you? I think they've realised, oh crap, we can't sell off the NHS, but you just don't know whether they're just going to push through for it. They do seem to want to sell it to America, don't they?
Well, it could still be, one of the things that they want to impress, or one of the things we've still got the NHS. It's still possible,
Why
come and get your hands
do they
on
keep hitching their wagon to America? It's decaying. Let's face it, I keep saying it, and I wish people would stop dancing around this. we're not facing it's not a racism problem in America. There is, don't get me wrong, there is a racism problem in America, but the problem isn't the racism problem. The racism stems from the real problem. And that's the fact that they've got a fascist government. It's fascist. You go down all the ticks of what's the signs of a fascist government? Oh well, a concentration on military supremacy. It's like tick. Okay, and what's the next one? Oh well, you got a combination of corporate power and government power. It's like, tick. And you just go down them one by line by line by line. An absolute an overwhelming concentration on nationalism and national pride. It's Jesus Christ. They get up and sing to the Pledge of Allegiance in school in the morning. And it's you look at how they treat. I mean, the human rights abuses. You could talk endlessly about them. You've researched them. Their human rights abuses are incredible around the world in what they've been doing. And I really wish that people would stop dancing around the issue and stop saying that America's got problems. This that no, America's fascist, and we've hitched our wagon to them. I think maybe the United Kingdom and the people in the United Kingdom should say, no, our granddads, died in World War II to stop to make sure that we didn't end up under the thumb of fascism, and we've ended up under the thumb of fascism. What? Because we've elected weak people into power or something like that, or people who are swayed by money or sex or whatever it is. And what the hell? Why are we going along with them? And nobody can say to me, "Oh well, it's because of so and so. It's because they do this." Why are we going along with them again? Why? What do they have on us?
Well, I don't know. I guess because they're so powerful, if we you know uh, roll over and do enough tricks, they'll look after us.
No, they
Maybe
won't.
that's the idea
No, they
behind that.
won't. No, they won't. Look at all the deals they've done
Yeah,
around. Look at every deal they've done. Trump has just come and ripped up. Paris Climate Accord, rip it up. IMF treaty, rip it up. Was it medium range nuclear treaty, or rip it up? Every single time. Iran, the JCPOA, rip it up. If there's a country in the world at the moment who's thinking, who I'd like to go into business with. Who's really they always, treat people correctly, and they always treat people fairly. It's America. If there's a country around the world saying that, I'm like, where are you getting this information from? They treat people horrifically around the world, and the second it's to their advantage to cut an ally loose, they will do it and not give you a second's thought.
yeah.
There's a
It
history
is.
of it.
It's like the biggest bully in the playground, isn't it? And you
Yeah.
kind of stick with them maybe for protection, but there's no loyalty there. The moment you annoy them, they're just going to treat you like they treat all their other victims,
I know. And the strange
unless you
thing
can
is the
give them enough
reason.
of your lunch.
Yeah, the only reason we need their protection is because we've been going around punching people in the face with, doing what they're bidding. What we were doing in Syria is a real worry to me, though, Nina, because what we were doing in Syria, it looks like we were perpetrating false flags on behalf of the United States. We were doing them. It looks like we were involved in a false flag on behalf of elements within the United States government. And that's the supreme war crime. And the people who, in our country, who we have given sovereignty to protect us and to keep this country safe, the people who have done that in Syria, they need to go to prison. Because
Yeah,
if they don't go to prison, it's that moral hazard thing again, isn't it? We've incentivized it. They can get away with it, and they're going to do it again. And we're going to continue doing it and continue doing it until we end up like America, with riots and unrest and businesses failing. And, we need to, I think, in this country realise that this is where we're heading if we don't
I agree.
swiftly
Yeah, I think
change
if we
course.
if we if we align closely with the US, which is very possible, under this government. If we look at America, and that we could be looking at ourselves, you know, in the near future.
It's inevitable, I think, and what's worrying is you don't see other countries around the world hitching their wagons to America, do you? The EU are pushing away, pulling away. Obviously, China or
Yeah,
China, they're going to overtake America probably this year. I would have thought in the economy. They said 2025 not long ago, but I think America's on the verge of a massive Great Depression that might send their economy under China's, and China will become the leading force, the leading economy in the world. It's inevitable now. And my worry is that this failing, whenever there's been a failing empire like that, it's always ended in war in the past. And this is a let's face it, a country with fascists at the head of it that's got nuclear weapons, and it's the only country that's used them in anger in our
yeah,
history, and we need to remember that.
and it's got plenty of targets. It's, I mean, it's gangster, isn't it?
Well, it really is,
It
and
really
it,
is
it really
gangster.
is, and it makes you think. If we became a problem in the United Kingdom, say we didn't follow them in, we weren't their lapdog all of a sudden, would they point those weapons towards us? I've already heard Trump talk about sanctioning Europe and sanctioning the EU, his allies. What's he going to
Mm.
start sanctioning the UK soon?
This is
Um,
another worry, isn't it? If we do align closely and we've got a lot of eggs in one basket.
with alienating the rest of the world. Do we, as a country, do you think it's wise that we hitch our wagon to one failing superpower that is run by elements of fascism at the top, or do we maybe break free and say to the other 99% of the world, oh yeah, we're open for business now. Yeah, we've had Brexit. It's I just wish that there were adults running this country rather than very weak, very stupid people who think that they know best.
So if they were held to account, things would be a lot different. If they could be prosecuted. So if you waste, like Chris Failing, Grayling, you know, millions and millions of
Yeah,
pounds just wasted. Other countries, you'd be prosecuted. You have to be accountable. Um, Everyone makes mistakes. Making a mistake is normal human thing. But when you make a one massive catastrophic decision after another that results in calamitous, you know, consequences for people, why aren't you held to account? You know?
yeah. There's got to be some. They've got to be held to account. This revolving door has got to stop as well between the public and the private sector. I've seen. Have you heard of Spinwatch? Spinwatch do some great work with regards to looking at what happens to Ministry of Defence contractors and how
Oh,
they'll get jobs within the government. I know of one guy, for instance, he got a job on the Defence Advisory Panel that dishes out the D notices to say, oh no, no, you can't print that because that will weaken our national defence. He went from in those meetings and basically saying to the newspapers, or rather at a newspaper saying, right, okay, we can talk about this, that, and the other. To then he left his job on that advising the newspapers, and he ended up going on being head of a radio station. I've forgotten the guy's name now. Head of a radio station that got a massive amount of money in funding from the Ministry of Defence, to the point where it was like astounding. It's like you are literally just giving this guy a backhander, right?
yeah.
And Spinwatch do some great work with regards to looking at that. That needs to stop. But I honestly believe civilian oversight is the way we've got to go forward, and we're going to have to. Like you say, the court system is just it's a shadow of what it was. It's a shell, and it's not fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, do you honestly, can you honestly say, can you say that a poor black person, maybe, working two jobs and not a penny to his name, is going to get the same um, fairness in the law that a rich white billionaire is going to get with all his, lawyers and all the money? He can't, can he? And that's, you know, straight away, that's a massive problem that's got to be addressed, because otherwise, especially with the wealth inequality that we've got, the rich are just going to end up being, untouchable.
But I think this is one of the things that the case of Julian Assange has exposed is the allegiance. I mean, I guess lots of people have recognized, judges usually come from um, public school. A lot of them have got Lord and Lady as parents, and they're born into privilege. So, that's always been there. But the case of Julian Assange has really shown it's more than just an allegiance. It's shown a real contempt for anyone doesn't, who doesn't follow the establishment, who doesn't. Uh,
Toe the establishment line. Is it anybody
yeah,
who's a problem?
and
It's
it's really
a
discredited the whole just justice system, you know, um, in a way that is quite shocking. So I mean, I don't know how it's going to come back from this, and unless it's dealt with at the next stage better. But it's not looking good at the moment, the
it's
way
not it's not
authorities
looking
are.
good. I don't know.
But I
I'm
don't see how they're going to come back from this. It's lost its legitimacy. You know,
I'm hopeful that something's going to happen to uh, usher in massive change. I'm hopeful that something's. I don't know what it is, but I'm hopeful I'm hopeful that it's going to. That's all I can do is just hope that it's going to happen. Um, we've certainly done, I think, all we can to help. To you've done some wonderful reports I've seen on the unfairness with regards to the Assange trial, and the I mean, even the judges, their husbands have been in WikiLeaks, haven't they? The judges that are
oh,
judging him,
that's
their
right.
husbands have been actually in WikiLeaks
In
documents, haven't they?
cables, yeah. Judge Arbuthnot's husband was in the Ministry of Defence, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
he's in the Ministry of Defence, and his firm was in WikiLeaks for having, it was contracts, I think, with the Ministry of Defence. What's
Yeah.
next for you, Nina? What are you going to do next?
I'm still working on looking into the way this arbitrary nature of our courts and how they treat him, Assange, and
Hmm.
how they treat other extradition cases. He seems to be extraordinarily um, uh, treated extraordinarily. There's no other way to say it, and you have to ask why that is. And the only way you can see that is the case is by comparing to other uh, to how the courts treat
Yeah,
others. You know,
yeah. I like I say with Lisa Longstaff, she really did open my eyes with the girl, because what the way they've painted him as a rapist, whilst keeping that the rape allegations going against him, and keeping that it wasn't even there weren't charges against him or anything like that in Sweden. It was just hearsay, wasn't it? It was just, oh, they say in Sweden it's going to get open again. There were never any charges from Sweden, even though the media in this
no,
country
they just
repeatedly said it.
they hung allegations over him
Yeah, it was just smear.
for years.
And whilst they were smearing him and calling him and alleging he was a rapist, and in every article they wrote about him, they'd put rape in the title or allegations of rape. And meanwhile, they're letting actual rapists go free in this country, and where there's massive amount of evidence, and they're not pursuing the case because they don't think that or maybe it's 50-50 whether they'll win in court or not. They think so. They don't. You know what lawyers are like. They only really want to take a case, and if they're sure they're going to win it. And
Yeah.
whilst Julian is down there and they're calling him a rapist, as somebody who there's no evidence that that's happened at all, and even the two women involved haven't accused him of rape either. That's something they
No,
didn't
I mean,
accuse him of rape. That's the
Niels Meltzer has written a very detailed analysis, hasn't he, of the whole of the Swedish,
he's
uh,
amazing, that man is.
yeah, what the Swedish prosecution authorities services did. So, if anyone wanted to really look at what happened, then the Niels Meltzer article on that's really good.
Yeah, he's done some great work. Nils Meltz was the special rapporteur from the
Yeah,
United Nations in the case, and he when he was originally assigned the Assange case, because obviously he was assigned the Assange case because there was an allegation that he was being psychologically tortured, in arbitrary detention. He
mm.
wasn't too happy about it. He's talked quite openly. I wasn't happy that I was going to get Assange assigned this a case because it was so, you know, there was so many. It was such a he didn't want the blue touch paper lighting, but once he sat down with the man and talked to him, he realised really quite rather quickly that this is a man who has been psychologically tortured horrifically. I can't imagine being locked. What they did, arbitrary detention. He was in arbitrary. That's worse than prison. He can't even get daylight. He can't even get sunlight. I mean, I'm taking vitamin D tablets. That's how much of
Yeah.
a health kick I'm on. And you can only get some vitamin D from light. You can't even go outside. It's no wonder he was in the emergency ward over at Belmarsh for those months, because he would have been in an absolutely terrible way. He had a massive problem with his shoulder. There was a root canal he needed to have as well. He must have been in absolute agony with his tooth. And we've done all this. Why? Why? We've done all this. Why? Because you publish secrets about America. So what? So what? Why are we so under the thumb of? Why have we got to do what the Americans want every single time? Why? With Brexit, they screamed over and over again, didn't they? We're going to take back our sovereignty. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if we're doing the bidding of another nation, we haven't got it, have we, Nina?
No, it's just a nonsense. It was just a lip service, wasn't it? Just a. I mean, where is the sovereignty? We can see, because we study what this government does, how it
Yeah.
serves. We study how the courts are now serving the US. Effectively, our prison service is now serving the US, because if the US want anyone they don't like, they target in the UK. We now know that our prison service will just take them, and they'll treat them badly, and they'll put them in the worst category prison.
Yeah.
We know that there's nothing in our country that's not been compromised under the Assange case. But we also know even the Bank of England serves the US. We know because it's holding Venezuelan gold.
Really,
So
is it? I don't reckon it's got it anymore. I
they're not,
reckon,
they're not.
I reckon the reason we're withholding that gold is we haven't got it. Honestly, I reckon we haven't. That 1.4 billion is, we sold that a while ago. I don't think they've got the gold. I really don't. But again, you're right. Why are we withholding this 1.4 billion dollars of gold? That's Venezuela. It was mined in Venezuela as well. That gold was actually mined in Venezuela. Why are we holding 1.4 billion pounds of Venezuelan gold? Because America has told us to.
Yeah.
What?
So
What?
where's our independence? Where's our integrity?
So, the Americans like, well, no, Juan Guaido's president now. Who? Juan Guaido. No, when I say who, that wasn't us saying who. That's the Venezuelans saying who. 18% of Venezuelans had heard of the guy, and America said, yeah, he's your president now.
Is
And
he
he
did
just,
that?
he declared himself president, with about 30,
Yeah.
30 stupid,
Amazing.
stupid armed personnel or cops. who quickly realised their mistake and went back to the other side with a tail between their legs. You know why we are going along with this pantomime on behalf of America is beyond me. But like I say, what they've I think they've got something on us. They must do because throughout history, I can't remember a time when the United Kingdom were just doing the bidding of another country. I just can't. I can't remember. So you know, there either must be something in it for us, or there must have something over our heads. And I'm betting it's got something to do with the Epstein stuff, and that's the reason why we're going around the world. You know, let's face it. You remember Trump asked us to hijack that Iranian tanker, so
Yeah.
we turned our navy into pirates for America for a short while. Makes you proud to
Yeah.
be British, doesn't it, Nina?
Yeah. It's we're better than that.
We are. We're better than that. You're better than that for sure. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Gordon. Really
Thanks.
enjoyed
Is
having a
there
chat.
we covered everything? Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I wanted to just mention, when we were talking about the effects of lockdown,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to imply that I was that I was, completely opposed to the
I didn't get that
lockdown.
impression. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't get the impression. I did, with the lockdown thing. People have accused me that, like, people still tag me on Twitter. Oh, Gordon, you still think stopping at home, saying people to stop at home was a good thing? Yeah, yeah, I do. I don't know whether you noticed, but more people died than usual for quite an extended period of time. More people were people saying to me that people. This is what I can't get with people who were saying that the lockdown was terrible. It's like, well, there was more people dying than normal, correct?
yeah,
Yes, they say
yes,
yes.
yeah,
It's like an
yeah,
inordinate amount of people died that they normally do. It's like, right, okay, so what's causing it then if it's not the coronavirus? And there were crickets. It's okay, so people are dying. Governments around the world are losing their shit and running around like a. Yeah, stop at home. Stop at
yeah,
home. Everybody stop at home. That's probably the best thing to do because even if they are lying to us, and let's face it, they always lie to us, so they probably are. There's a bloody good chance that they're freaking out over something. So that's why I
yeah.
told people to
I
stop at
mean,
home.
there were
And
too many governments all in agreement that there was a real worry that a large number of people could die, could overwhelm the National Health Service. We wouldn't be able to treat in the hospital, and it wasn't like other flu cases where because with this particular illness, you need there was a high risk of or a high demand for ventilation,
yeah.
so there was a genuine concern about that. So it wasn't just like a flu.
No, no, it wasn't.
So
And my sister actually works in the healthcare industry, and I got to be careful. It, the problems that they face are real. The problems that they face that the media have said that they face are real.
yeah,
I've had friends who have lost lifelong friends who said that they died of the coronavirus. People in their 40s who
yeah,
had maybe they just had an operation, who caught it, couldn't because of his immune system was down. That was it. Sorry, good night. He thought he was going to make a recover from the operation, didn't. I've had friends' moms die who were elderly for sure. They were like late 80s, 90s, but at the same time, you know. Oh, people say, oh well, they're 80. So really, well, if your mom was in her 80s and she got coronavirus and died, would you have gone, oh well, she was in her 80s? No, you want your mom to live as long as possible, don't you? So I just it was right, I think, to lock everything down, and
yeah. I mean,
it's right to be cautious,
there were
and it's
hundreds of NHS frontline staff that died. A lot of frontline education staff died. A lot of transport workers died. And if we hadn't tried to, if we hadn't isolated,
A lot more
That
people
could
would
have,
have.
it could have been a lot worse.
A lot more
It,
people would have. You
yeah,
know,
so
it's hopefully this has given us some time. I'm not an expert. We could have another outbreak at any time, I suppose. But I certainly don't think they're all lying to us about this. Now, you know, people will argue whether it's a man-made thing or not. If it is man-made, I'd say it's probably American. Although I did hear yesterday, Nina, that March 2019, there are, let me get this straight, there are reports that from water samples from March 2019 in Barcelona,
oh
that
yes,
there was COVID 19.
I saw that. Yeah,
So this might actually be the Spanish flu.
yeah.
One thing we know about the Spanish flu is it definitely didn't start in Spain. So this one might actually be it. A nice little
It's
way
very
to end the
strange though.
stream, I think. To
Yeah.
end the. Thanks so much, Nina. Thanks so much for talking to me. Um,
Thank you, Gordon. It's been nice.
it's been lovely, and I hope you'll come back and talk to me again. Next time, I want to sit down with you and talk to you and have a proper, sit down, because it's always better when you can feel the energy in the room. And I want to start doing these, the podcast, obviously, over the internet where possible. But as things open up, and hopefully as coronavirus goes away, I'll be on the travels, hopefully sitting down with people like your good self.
Great. Look forward to hearing them.
You're awesome, Nina. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.